Whoever gives generously prospers even more, and whoever gives drink will also be refreshed. This I wrote in Proverbs chapter 11, verse 25. And surrounding that verse I also wrote, one gives freely and grows all the richer. Another withholds what should be given and only suffers want. A generous person will be enriched, and one who gives water will also be given water. The people curse those who hoard grain, but blessing is on the head of the one who sells it. Whoever seeks good finds favor, but evil will come to the one who searches for it. Whoever trusts in their riches will fall, but the righteous will flourish like green leaves. Proverbs 11:24-28. There is much I want to show you and deepen regarding the wisdom hidden in these words, so I will guide you through selected readings from the Holy Scriptures and reflections to build up your spirit. The man who fears the Lord understands that when he shares, he does not lose. He opens the gates for his life to be continually refreshed. And now I want to share knowledge with you. I want you to feel this moment as a rest in the midst of the world's haste. Breathe deeply, wise man, and allow yourself to join me and be still. Imagine sitting beside a king who does not speak of vanity or fleeting things, but of wisdom, who does not display crowns, but shares treasures that cannot be lost. Here I will speak to you as if I were King Solomon himself, so that you may enter into an immersive experience in the wisdom of God's word. Teachings given by one who received from the Most High the mission to deliver clear direction for your life. This is not just about hearing ancient advice, but about understanding in a light conversation the wisdom that God granted me, applied to your work, your home, and your decisions. Every word you will hear here is to open your eyes to an eternal principle. The generous man prospers, and he who waters will also be watered. Before we continue, I want to offer a prayer for you. Father of all abundance, open now the heart of this man who fears you. May he not withhold out of fear, but learn to give with trust. May the spirit of generosity blossom in his life like a tree planted by streams of water, and may its fruits be abundance, peace, and purpose. Bless the hands that work, the lips that praise, and the heart that shares. Cause the life of the one who chooses to serve and to give to prosper. For you are the God who sustains those who trust in you. Amen. And if this word is already stirring something within you, I want to ask something simple. Like this video and subscribe to the channel, not to accumulate yet another piece of content, but to walk with me on a journey of wisdom rooted in eternity. Here every encounter is an opportunity to grow as a wise man, as a man who fears the Lord, learning to prosper through generosity that serves and nourishes life. The practical secret of generosity. Let's open the scriptures to Proverbs chapter 3, verses 9 and 10. There I wrote, "Honor the Lord with your wealth, and with the first fruits of all your income. Then your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will overflow with new wine." What I intended to teach here is that true abundance begins when the man who fears the Lord recognizes that everything he has belongs first to the Lord. The act of giving the first fruits, that is, the first part of his earnings, is not a loss, but an offering of honor that opens the gates of divine favor. Notice how this shows up in real life. Many wait until they have leftovers to give, but Scripture shows us that the blessing is found in putting God first. The worker who receives his wages and sets aside a portion for the Lord is sowing trust, not in his own strength, but in God's faithful care. The entrepreneur who makes generosity a part of his business sees not only his barns filled with resources, but also his name filled with respect and trust. Generosity, when done in honor, attracts lasting prosperity. Now I turn to Proverbs chapter 22, verse 9. I wrote, "The generous will be blessed, for they share their bread with the poor." The lesson is simple. The blessing rests upon the one who does not close his eyes to need. The size of the portion matters less than the heart that is willing to share. This is a principle that reveals itself even in the smallest of things. Consider someone who shares a modest meal with a neighbor or takes time to listen to someone in distress. That man is already being blessed because what he gives returns in the form of peace, honor, and respect. The wise man learns that the blessing of generosity is not measured by value, but by the spirit with which it is given. Very well, Let's now turn to Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verses 1 and 2. There I said, "Cast your bread upon the waters, for after many days you will find it again. Give a portion to 7 or even to 8, for you do not know what disaster may come upon the land." What I intended to teach here is that generosity is like sowing into the future. The one who gives does not lose. He is casting seeds that at the appointed time will return as provision. And observe how this applies to daily life. A professional who helps someone just starting their career may not see any immediate return, but years later, he may find in that very person an unexpected source of favor. A family that opens its table to others may discover that, in their own time of need, there will be hands to uphold them. The man who fears the Lord understands that every act of generosity is like bread cast upon the waters. Sooner or later it returns as an abundant harvest. That is the first secret. Giving is not losing, it is planting. And to make that even clearer, let me now reflect more deeply on the root of this deception that many carry. You can apply this simply in your daily life. Think of how a word of encouragement given to someone who's discouraged can shift the course of their entire day. Or how sharing a meal with someone who had nothing to eat can plant a seed of gratitude that lasts a lifetime. Don't wait for big moments to be generous. It is through small daily gestures that the stream keeps flowing. A smile, a listening ear, a practical act of help. All of these are living waters flowing through you. Now then, let's open the Bible to Proverbs chapter 28, verse 27. There I wrote, "Whoever gives to the poor will not be in need, but whoever closes his eyes will be cursed by many." What I meant to say is that generosity is protection against scarcity, while indifference becomes a trap that leads to poverty and loneliness. The one who shuts his eyes to the needs of others opens cracks through which ruin can enter. And how relevant that still is. How many times have we seen people who accumulate much, yet live surrounded by inner poverty because they never learned how to share? Others, who have little but never hesitate to extend their hand, are surrounded by honor, respect, and even unexpected provision. The man who fears the Lord understands that it's impossible to be indifferent and truly prosperous at the same time. Real prosperity flourishes in the heart that gives. I'll now continue to Psalm 37, verses 25 and 26, written by my father David. He said, "I was young and now I am old, yet I have never seen the righteous forsaken or their children begging for bread. They are always generous and lend freely. Their children will be a blessing." What my father meant to teach here is that generosity not only sustains the life of the righteous, but establishes a legacy that reaches the next generations. Compassion opens paths of blessing that overflow beyond one's own life. And I say to you, that promise is still alive today. A man who walks in generosity may face difficult times, but he will never be abandoned. God himself takes charge of sustaining his table, and the descendants of that man reap the fruit of his faithfulness. It's like planting a tree that will give shade not only to you, but also to your children and grandchildren. The righteous man who gives writes a story of abundance that doesn't end with him, but continues through his lineage. Now let's open the book of the law in Deuteronomy chapter 15, from verses 7 to 10. There it is written, "If there is a poor person among you, one of your brothers, in any of the towns of the land that the Lord your God is giving you, do not harden your heart or shut your hand against your poor brother. Instead, you shall open your hand to him and freely lend him enough for whatever he needs. Be careful not to harbor this wicked thought in your heart. The 7th year, the year of release, is near, and so you look grudgingly on your poor brother and give him nothing. He may then appeal to the Lord against you, and you will be guilty of sin. Give to him freely and without a grudging heart. Then because of this, the Lord your God will bless you in all your work and in everything you put your hand to." What Moses meant to teach is that generosity should not be calculated coldly or from fear, but lived out in freedom and in trust that it is the Lord who sustains. This teaching is precious for daily life. Many refrain from helping because they are trapped by the fear of lacking, but Scripture reveals that the blessing lies in opening your hand without hesitation. The wise man understands that it is not his bank account that secures the future, but the faithfulness of God who blesses the work of his hands. The one who gives with an upright heart does not lose. He becomes a participant in the divine flow of provision. And when God promises to bless in all you do, and in everything you put your hand to, it means even the little you have can multiply into abundance when used to serve. There is still a barrier that keeps many from experiencing the prosperity that flows from generosity. It is the fear of giving, the concern that if they share, they will not have enough for themselves. That fear acts like a shadow that binds the heart and keeps it closed, even when the word has already promised that the generous will prosper. What I intended to teach in my Proverbs is that withholding out of fear never brings security. It only breeds scarcity. The man who fears the Lord learns that true provision does not come from what he stores away, but from the faithfulness of the Lord who sustains those who share. Fear is a thief of generosity, but trust in God is the foundation of abundance. If you reflect on your own life, you may see how that fear has shaped some of your choices. How many times have you held back from helping someone because you feared you wouldn't have enough for yourself? Perhaps you've refrained from giving, from sharing a meal, or from lending a hand out of fear of losing the little you had. But the wise man understands that heaven's math is different from man's. The more you give, the more it multiplies. When you choose to trust in God, you find that bread never runs out, provision is renewed, and peace replaces anxiety. Generosity is not a risk. It is a declaration of faith in the God who provides. And so you'll never forget, let me tell you a simple parable. Imagine a man who fills his barn with grain and locks it up, fearing the supply will run out. Over time, the stored grain rots, and the barn becomes empty and useless. Now imagine another man who takes part of the harvest and shares it with the hungry, plants new seeds, and trusts that God will send rain in its season. His barn, though it may seem smaller each day, is always full, because generosity creates a cycle of renewal. What I meant to show is that a barn only stays alive when what's inside it is put into motion. This parable applies directly to your life. When you hold everything for yourself, whether it's money, time, or even love, you soon realize your heart becomes a dry well, incapable of producing joy. But when you decide to water others, even with the little you have, you discover there is always renewal. Friendship strengthens, resources multiply, peace grows. The man who fears the Lord understands that abundance does not come from what he hoards, but from what he gives. That's why I say to you, generosity is practical, concrete, and visible. It's not merely a thought, and it's an action that transforms both the one who receives and the one who gives. The purpose. The generous heart is light. Let me now open with you Ecclesiastes chapter 5 from verses 18 to 20. There I wrote, I have seen that it is good and fitting for one to eat and drink and enjoy the good of all his labor under the sun during the few days of life which God gives him, for this is his portion. Also, for every man to whom God has given riches and possessions, and the ability to enjoy them, to accept his lot and rejoice in his labor, this is the gift of God. He will not dwell unduly on the days of his life, because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart. What I intended to teach here is that the purpose of wealth is not merely to accumulate, but to gladden the heart with gratitude and to recognize each portion as a divine gift. Wealth without purpose becomes a burden, but when enjoyed in honor before God, it lights up life with joy. In today's world, this lesson remains alive. Many live only to accumulate more, never stopping to taste the fruit of their own labor. They become slaves to hurry, comparison, and anxiety. But the wise man learns that each meal with his family, every moment of rest after a day of labor, every simple celebration is already a sign of prosperity. The true purpose of wealth is not in what is accumulated, but in the joy and balance it sustains when lived with generosity. That is why I say, to enjoy is also a form of worship, recognizing that all things come from Him. Now let us move forward together to Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verses 4 through 6. There I wrote, Whoever watches the wind will not plant, whoever looks at the clouds will not reap. As you do not know the path of the wind or how the body is formed in a mother's womb, so you cannot understand the work of God, the Maker of all things. Sow your seed in the morning, and at evening let your hands not be idle, for you do not know which will succeed. whether this or that, or whether both will do equally well. What I meant to show here is that one must not wait for perfect conditions to act generously. The generous heart does not calculate the wind or observe the clouds. It sows, knowing that it is God who multiplies. This principle is deeply practical. How many times have you postponed an act of kindness, waiting for the right moment? Perhaps you thought to help someone when you had more resources, or to spend time with your family when your schedule became less full. But the man who fears the Lord understands that the time to sow is now. Small seeds of generosity planted today may be the very ones that open doors tomorrow. Don't wait for all conditions to align. Offer what is already in your hands and trust that God will bring the increase. The wind may shift, the clouds may mislead, but the generous heart is always fertile. Let me also open with you Song of Songs, chapter 8, verses 6 and 7. There I wrote, "Place me like a seal over your heart, like a seal on your arm. For love is as strong as death, its jealousy unyielding as the grave. Its flames are blazing fire, a mighty flame. Many waters cannot quench love, rivers cannot sweep it away. If one were to give all the wealth of one's house for love, it would be utterly scorned." What I intended to teach here is that true love cannot be bought or extinguished, for its flame is the flame of the Lord. In the same way, generosity is not measured by the amount of wealth, but by the strength of the heart that gives. This is a fundamental lesson for you, wise man. Many believe they can only be generous when they have much to offer, but the truth is that the flame of generosity is kindled in the heart long before it is revealed by the hands. It is the attitude of love, of giving, of serving that reveals spiritual maturity. A word of encouragement, a meal shared, time devoted to listening, these are acts of generosity just as powerful as a large offering. The man who fears the Lord understands that his light is not measured by what he owns, but by his willingness to share what he has. Now let us turn to the book of Proverbs, chapter 19, verse 17. I wrote, "Whoever is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will reward them for what they have done." What I meant to show is that generosity is not merely a human act, but a spiritual investment before God. When you extend your hand to the needy, you are not simply helping someone. You are placing something directly in the hands of the Most High, who has promised to repay. This is the law of generosity. It never returns void. See how this continues to be fulfilled even today. An act of compassion may seem small, but before God it is recorded as an eternal seed. Helping a neighbor with food, offering guidance to a child, comforting someone in crisis. All of these are like lending to the Lord, who never leaves a debt unpaid. The man who fears God rests in this certainty. What he gives is never lost, for the Creator himself ensures its multiplication. Let us now move to Proverbs chapter 21, verses 25 and 26. There I said, "The craving of a sluggard will be the death of him, because his hands refuse to work. All day long he craves for more, but the righteous give without sparing." What I meant to reveal is that the greedy heart lives constantly in desire, always craving, never satisfied. But the righteous finds fullness because he gives of himself, and God sustains him. Generosity is a source of satisfaction, while covetousness is a source of restlessness. This is a powerful revelation for your daily life. Many live chasing what they don't have, dreaming of riches they never reach yet remain empty. Meanwhile, those who give discover they always have enough, because abundance is born from trust in God, not from the sum of possessions. The wise man learns that peace does not come from what he accumulates, but from what he is willing to give with a pure heart. Giving is always the path to fulfillment. I also want to share with you what my father David wrote in Psalm 112, verses 5 to 9. "Good will come to those who are generous and lend freely, who conduct their affairs with justice. Surely the righteous will never be shaken. They will be remembered forever. They will have no fear of bad news. Their hearts are steadfast, trusting in the Lord. Their hearts are secure. They will have no fear. In the end, they will look in triumph on their foes. They have freely scattered their gifts to the poor. Their righteousness endures forever. Their horn will be lifted high in honor." What my father meant to show is that the generous man is unshakable, because his strength lies not in wealth, but in righteousness that endures. This is the eternal testimony of the man who fears God. His memory does not fade, his righteousness echoes forever, and his strength is exalted in honor. Even in the face of bad news, he stands firm, because his trust is not in passing resources, but in the Lord who sustains him. What David revealed is that generosity builds a legacy that no crisis can destroy. The wise man understands that to give is not to lose, but to plant deep roots that support generations. There is something I must show you, wise man. Many practice acts of generosity, but do so out of vanity, seeking human recognition. They give to be seen, help to receive applause, share only when there is immediate return. But that is not the kind of generosity that pleases God. When the heart is set on people, the reward fades with the applause. What I meant to teach in my writings is that the true value of generosity lies in intention, not in performance. God is not impressed by theatrical gestures, but by sincere hearts. In practical life, this means that you can help in silence, unseen by anyone, and still be building eternal treasure. Think of someone who discreetly supports a needy family without telling anyone, or someone who offers time and listening to a friend in crisis without expecting thanks. These gestures may seem invisible to human eyes, but they shine before the throne of God. The man who fears the Lord understands that true generosity does not seek a stage. It serves as worship before the Most High. I want to leave you with a symbolic image you will never forget. The flame that is shared lights other candles without being extinguished. This is the very nature of generosity. The fire that lights one candle does not diminish when it ignites another. On the contrary, it multiplies in brightness and warmth. So too is the generous heart. The more it gives, the more it illuminates. The flame of generosity is never weakened by the act of sharing. Instead, it becomes more intense as it spreads. This metaphor is reflected in everyday gestures. When you share your bread, you ignite hope in someone who was hungry. When you speak a word of encouragement, you ignite courage in someone who was drowning in despair. When you offer time to listen, you ignite comfort in someone who was silent. The wise man understands that every generous act is like a light that expands, and in illuminating others, he himself begins to walk a brighter path. For the light he gives returns to light his own steps. What is watered grows. Let us now open together the Song of Songs, chapter 2, verses 10 through 13. There I wrote, "My beloved spoke and said to me, 'Arise, my darling, my beautiful one, and come with me. See, the winter is past, the rains are over and gone. Flowers appear on the earth, the season of singing has come. The cooing of doves is heard in our land. The fig tree forms its early fruit, the blossoming vines spread their fragrance. Arise, come, my darling, my beautiful one, come with me.'" What I meant to show here is that even love must be cultivated. Like springtime that demands care in order to blossom, bonds do not flourish through neglect, but through mutual devotion. See how this unfolds in practical life. A relationship between friends, brothers, or husband and wife does not flourish on its own. Just as the fig tree bears fruit only when watered, the bond requires time, attention, and effort. The wise man understands that it is not enough to feel love. One must water it with concrete actions, with presence, with kindness. The winter may pass, but only the field that has been tended will bloom. The same is true in the human heart. Let us remain in the Song of Songs, chapter 5, verse 1. There I wrote, "I have come into my garden, my sister, my bride. I have gathered my myrrh with my spice. I have eaten my honeycomb and my honey. I have drunk my wine and my milk. Eat, friends, and drink. Drink your fill, lovers." What I intended to teach here is that generosity in love is an invitation to share, not something to be hoarded for oneself. The garden is meant to be enjoyed when it is opened to others. In practice, this means that strong relationships are not built in selfishness but in sharing. Friendship grows stronger when there is space to sit at the same table. Marriage blooms when husband and wife share both joy and pain. Even faith grows when it is shared in communion. The man who fears God learns that opening the garden of his life to another is an act of trust and generosity that multiplies joy. Let us now open to Proverbs chapter 17, verse 17. I wrote, A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for a time of adversity. What I meant to show is that true friendship is not based on convenience. It is watered through constancy and proves its worth in adversity. This can be clearly seen in daily life. Many will walk beside you in fair weather but disappear in the storm. A true friend remains. He is generous with his time, his listening, his presence, even when there is nothing to gain in return. The wise man understands that generosity in relationships is not revealed in sweet words, but in silent loyalty when the other needs it most. In relationships, there is a common mistake many make, believing they can survive on feelings alone. But I tell you, emotion is like a flame, and without wood it dies out. What sustains true bonds is not merely the initial emotion, but the constant generosity of time, of listening, of patience, and of care. The heart that only wants to feel but never give is building on sand. For relationships do not survive on intentions alone, but on actions. Look around you, and you will see. How many marriages begin passionately, but grow cold because neither is willing to give of themselves in daily life? How many friendships break because one always wanted to receive, but never made an effort to offer? The man who fears the Lord understands that relationships require daily cultivation, like the farmer who waters, prunes, and protects his vineyard. What is not cared for will wither, but what is watered blooms in abundance. And here I want to offer you a symbolic image to hold in your heart. The selfish heart is like a garden without water. The generous one is like a spring that gives life. Emotional miserliness, the withholding of affection, attention, and care, turns relationships into deserts. But the heart that shares becomes a fountain, able to sustain even the weary who come seeking rest. This is clearly seen in practice. Say, a father who gives time to listen to his children is watering a bond that will bear fruit in trust throughout their lives. A friend who shows up in times of sorrow is watering the garden of friendship with the waters of faithfulness. A spouse who offers patience and forgiveness, even on difficult days, is keeping the sap of love alive. The wise man does not fear to give of himself because he knows that the spring that pours out does not dry up. It is renewed. Now let us open together Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 9 through 12. There I wrote, "Two are better than one, because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. Also, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken." What I meant to show is that generous relationships are shields in times of weakness. He who cultivates companionship does not face battles alone. His life is strengthened because love and friendship create a force no man alone could wield. And look how this appears in practical life. The man who chooses to isolate himself for fear of being hurt becomes fragile in the face of storms. But the one who makes space for generosity in his relationships builds invisible walls that hold him in the day of trouble. That is why I tell you, the cord of 3 strands, man, his neighbor, and God, is not easily broken. Where there is giving and sharing, there is covenant, and where there is covenant, there is protection. Let us now open to Proverbs chapter 27, verses 9 and 10. There I wrote, "Perfume and incense bring joy to the heart, and the pleasantness of a friend springs from their heartfelt advice. Do not forsake your friend or a friend of your family, and do not go to your relative's house when disaster strikes you. Better a neighbor nearby than a relative far away." What I intended to teach is that friendship, when watered with generosity, becomes a balm for the soul. There are moments when the counsel of a faithful friend is worth more than riches, because he is present when even blood relatives are not. See how this speaks to us today. So often we underestimate the power of true friendship, forgetting that it is a divine gift. The man who fears God understands that generosity within relationships creates both comfort and direction, because a kind word spoken at the right moment is like perfume that softens the heavy air of the soul. It is better to walk with someone who shares their time, their attention, and their counsel, than to live surrounded by crowds without loyalty. And I want to remind you of Psalm 133, written by my father David. He declared, "Behold, how good and pleasant it is when brothers dwell together in unity. It is like the precious oil poured on the head, running down on the beard of Aaron, running down on the collar of his robe. It is like the dew of Hermon falling on Mount Zion. For there the Lord bestows his blessing, even life forevermore." What my father meant to reveal is that generosity in fellowship not only strengthens relationships, it draws the very blessing of the Lord. Where there is unity upheld by mutual care and surrender, there is abundant life. And this is a direct call to you. How many times has the lack of generosity in relationships caused unnecessary division and loneliness? But when there is selflessness, patience, and love, the home is filled with peace, friendship blossoms, and the very presence of God is manifested. The wise man understands that it's not just about maintaining relationships, it's about watering them until they become a fertile garden where all can rest and grow together. The one who gives himself stands strong. Many men close themselves off because they fear being used or rejected. Emotional barriers are often born from the fear of giving and not being received. But I tell you, isolation was never protection. It has always been a prison. The heart that guards itself too much becomes dry, like a field closed off from the rain. The man who fears the Lord learns that fellowship requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires courage. To love is to expose oneself, but it is also the only way to reap the strength that comes from relationship. In practice, this means opening yourself up to trust, even when disappointment has come before. A father who decides to speak again with his son, even after a difficult past. A friend who chooses to visit, not knowing if he'll be welcomed. A husband who chooses to listen before responding. These seemingly simple gestures are acts of emotional generosity. They break the cycle of fear and plant seeds of true connection. The wise man understands that whoever never gives, never reaps, and that love is always a risk, but also the greatest reward. And I want to leave you with a practical parable to seal this truth in your heart. A solitary tree may grow strong for a time, but when the storm comes, its roots are weak before the wind. But in the forest, the roots are intertwined. One sustains the other, and even the fiercest storm cannot topple them together. So it is with relationships. When watered by generosity, they become invisible foundations that uphold life. The one who refuses to live in fellowship may stand for a while, but his fall is certain when the wind blows strong. And this is where I ask you to reflect. Which relationships have sustained your life? Who has received your generosity of time, attention, and care? Wise man, the Lord did not create us for isolation, but for communion. And that communion only blossoms when there is true surrender. So when you water others with generosity, you too are watered, because the forest you help build will be the very shelter that protects you when the storm arrives. Now, wise man, we've reached the time to gather all we've sown on this journey. The principle that echoes from beginning to end is both simple and profound. The generous will prosper, and he who refreshes others will himself be refreshed. These words are not mere advice. They are a divine law. Just as the earth responds to the farmer who casts his seed, life responds to the one who shares. The one who lives closed within himself experiences lack, but the one who opens his hands sees abundance overflow in unexpected ways. What we've learned here is that generosity is prosperity in motion. In work and in finances, it appears when you share the fruit of your labor and honor the Lord with what you have. In purpose, it's revealed when you understand that life is not about hoarding, but about enjoying and sharing with meaning. In relationships, it flourishes when you water friendships, family, and fellowship with patience, time, and forgiveness. All of this builds not only a blessed present, but a legacy that remains, because generosity is a seed that never rots. Man who fears God, I tell you, do not be afraid to give, because to give is to live. Every act of generosity, great or small, is a testimony before the Most High. It is the way you become a channel of blessing and at the same time receive renewal. Remember, the one who keeps everything for himself is like a stagnant well, but the one who gives is like a flowing spring that never runs dry. So live wisely, be prosperous because you give, and abundant because you serve. May every gesture of yours become water for others, and as you water, may you be watered. This is the life that is never lost, the legacy that outlives you, the prosperity no crisis can destroy. If this message found space in your heart, put it into practice. Share in the comments a moment when generosity transformed your life, or a challenge where you're learning to become more generous. This will not only edify you, but also other wise men walking alongside us. And remain with me, because we still have many treasures of wisdom to uncover. And every encounter will be another seed in the garden of your life.